The hall remembered every whisper. Light from the high slits came thin as the edge of a coin, silvering the water in the great pool and turning the pale columns into the bones of some enormous creature laid down to sleep. The air smelled of wet stone and tallow. Breaths were soft as moth wings. She had been a dozen names in this place, then none at all, and if she stood long enough with her eyes shut she could map, in the dark inside her skull, every seam in the flagstone floor, every hairline crack in the ceiling, every place where the old temple sighed with the weight of the city that pressed against it like tide. She knelt where the floor was coldest. She had learned that spot in the first week, because cold taught attentiveness and pain taught economy, because one remained in memory and the other carved the memory into obedience. She folded herself so that the cords of her body vanished, shoulders low, spine long, the posture even in its humility suggesting the coil and uncoil of a snake. No one moved near her for a time. Somewhere a drop fell into the pool. The sound rang outward and back. She did not count. She had been a girl who counted steps, heartbeats, windows in a strange street, but the counting had been names by another measure. It had taken time to tear the habit out of herself. The kindly one, the name the novices used in their minds and never on their lips, stepped behind her. She felt the disturbance of air before his shadow crossed her, a draft that smelled faintly of cedar and lye and old paper. He said nothing. Words were wasted unless they cut. Later, when the floor had numbed her toes and bitten her knees to the bone, he spoke. "Stand," he said. She stood. The world moved a finger's width. The light had dropped, grayer now, as if the sky had put on a veil and decided to watch instead of adorn. Across the pool, beyond the pillars where masks hung like hives of silent wasps, two acolytes were lifting a litter. Its occupant was under a sheet. An old man surrendered his breath. An hour passed. The kindly one told her. He had asked for a quick night and received what was given. His face has been washed and salted. Will you take it from him? She did not answer "I will," or "yes," or "I am ready." She instead moved toward the litter, because to accept a task was to act, and each time she played the old game of reply her tongue tried to shape a name. She had unlearned the habit of words, and only the barest, most necessary syllables remained, like stones left in a river when all else had been worn away. They drew the sheet back. The old man had been handsome once, the bone of it still evident beneath the sag and the slack, the way the sea left its shape on stones even when it had long since ceased to strike them. His chin was blue with the faintest stubble. His eyelids lay thin and translucent, faint red filigree where the blood had once told its lace. His mouth betrayed satisfaction or surprise. She could not tell. She sat beside him and laid her fingers to his brow. Faces were taken with care or they did not take. The room cooled. No one else's breath touched the air, though she knew the kindly one watched, and somewhere beyond the pillars a novice swept with the straw broom that stitched the silence together. Her world narrowed to the old man's brow and to a point low in her own chest that was not her heart, exactly, but the place where she had taught herself to keep the shape of breath. She exhaled until the tide of herself went out, and when she inhaled again it was with no more insistence than a whisper returning through a doorway. Then she leaned over the old man and set her forehead to his. His life had gone, leaving a film of warmth and the imprint of all its memory like heat, left on a stone after sun has left. She sank into that heat the way someone steps into a pool at twilight, slow enough not to trouble the surface, steady enough not to turn back. For a moment she hovered above it all. Childhood laughter turned to smoke, fish scales glittering in a net, the smell of brine and tar, the exact weight of a silver coin, the ache in the knuckles after hauling rope in winter, and then she was level with it, then kneeling, then seated at the table of his memory, which turned its face toward her and did not know it was being devoured. She took not the memory but the map of the flesh, the web on which the memory had once hung. It was an old map but not illegible. Hands had traced those lines when he was in his 40s. He had kissed a woman with this mouth. He had shouted a name with this throat. She learned it all the way a thief learns a lock by touch, not by forcing but by surrendering and taking in the same breath. Then she drew back. The face on the table had become a kind of blank in her regard, the way a well-scrubbed board smells only of clean. The face she now carried was not yet awake but was hers to call. Wash him, The kindly one told the boys, "Salt him and lay him with the others. The rest of him will have its use before long." She rose, and the kindly one moved so that they walked side by side. He had once been tall or had learned to be tall. She was neither tall nor short, but in this house she existed without such measures. She looked up at him without seeking eyes. "There is a balance," he said. "There is always a balance. Those who would mock it are corrected, and those who would twist it are broken, and those who would worship it without understanding are given time to learn. Some make an art of avoiding their end, and the scale must be weighted to counter. You have studied these matters." She had. She had read the old books that smelled of damp string and lamp smoke and the slightly sweet taint of vellum. She had read accounts of priests and princes, of mountain kings and slave takers, of plagues that seemed to choose and swords that were said to think, of winters that took too much and summers that did not arrive. She had read the thin book W, written in the hand of a child, spidery, shy script, that claimed death was not an end but a place one traveled and returned from with frost in one's hair and a brightness in one's eyes. That book had been written too neatly to entirely believe, but the idea had troubled the surface of her thoughts for days. "There is one north of the world," the kindly one said now, as if her reading had been a river that brought her to this exact shore. "He takes and does not return. He makes of endings a kind of army. He is a fraud on the scale. He does not die as others do and does not live as they ever have. He stands on ice and calls winter by its first name. Such things cannot continue indefinitely without cost." He had never spoken to her so directly of a task. Normally, the little tasks were given like small cuts to the skin. She would be told to wash a floor that did not need it, or to follow a man in a blue hat, or to sit by a woman and learn the way her breath changed an hour before she met her gift. She would be sent to sell oysters, or to beg, or to move through the city unnoticed and take from the world only what the work required. To be told so openly about a figure with a crown of cold made the air flex. "Ships have returned to Bravos," the kindly one went on, "their hulls bearing ice, their crews missing fingers and parts of faces. Their stories so alike they are boring. This is not the ordinary winter that washes the world clean and leaves it ready for seed. Men in the canals see themselves in the water with eyes that are not their own and are told they will die soon. Those whose time has not yet come flee north, drawn like filings to a lodestone. Balance is a fine thing and contempt is a heavy hand against it. The house will answer." She said nothing. "Not I will answer for the house. Not send me." He paused in the hall of faces, where the light was diminished almost to taste, and the air carried the faint perfume of almond oil and old hair. The faces watched with their unwinking curiosity. Her skin remembered what it was to be compelled and commanded and took no offense at the memory. The recollection was a tool like any other. "You are suited to this work," the kindly one said. "Not because of what you were. What you were is of no use to us. Because of what you have unlearned. Because you can be cool and patient. Because you can travel lightly in other people's skin and leave no weight of your own behind. Because, if you are called to it, you can look upon a terrible thing and not love it nor hate it, but merely see it and make the seeing into action. We do not require you to want this task. Want is a rough instrument. Capacity is finer." Her eyes had been neutral. Now they warmed by a degree. In the way the ocean warms, no one feels it in the moment, but currents shift, seasons ahead. "If I go," she said, and there was a cracked fault line where old accent long buried threatened to push through like grass through snow. "I must be armed. He cannot be met with clean hands. Black glass," he said. "There are crates of it in the vaults of people who do not know what they own. There are spears of it rusting in warehouses in cities they do not visit. There is a dagger here in our own keeping, wrapped in a piece of felt and laid at the back of a shelf, given by a man who bought his release in a spring no one now living remembers. You may take it, but do not trust in the thing. Trust in your hands." She nodded, remembering the lesson beaten into her bones. Tools were whatever was at hand. The best blade in the world was worth exactly nothing in a clumsy grip. She had made of hand a tool. She had made of emptiness a blade. She would take the black glass because the world demanded the courtesy, and she would not rely on it to save her. "You will not be given a name for him," the kindly one said. "We do not purchase this death. We do not treat with it as with other debts. we answer a distortion in the scale. Their work was always couched in that language. Balancing, answering, redressing. Yet this felt different. The house abhorred spectacle, and nothing in the world was less quiet than the ending of a winter that had made an army of the dead. "How do I come near him?" she asked. "They smell heat. They hear life." "You know how to teach the blood to quiet," he replied. "You know how to move with stillness as a guide." He is proud. He walks where others freeze. He will come to look upon the places that still have beating hearts. The way a man with a good knife goes where fish are plenty. You will be there before him, or you will be near his path. Let him come to you like the answer to a question he thought he himself asked. She could almost feel snow in her mouth when he spoke. She remembered winters with a different clarity than summers. How the cold stripped away all ornament until only true things stood. She remembered stones black with wet, and a courtyard where iron sang, and a face she never thought she'd wear again. The memory tried to climb. She pushed it down, not with contempt, not with pity, but with that neutral hand that swept away everything not required for the task. "Gather what you need," he said. "Eat, sleep between now and this night's turn. There is a ship. You leave when it leaves." She went to the small cell whose thin mattress remembered the shape of her shoulder and hip. The blanket was clean in the way that old cloth is clean, no stains, no smell but the whisper of soap, and she lay on her back and thought of nothing. Years of practice made that at least simple. Next she sat and ate the bread and lentils a novice brought to her. The novice was new. He tried to look at her and not look at her at once, failing at both, and when he left the air trembling the way a reed bed trembles after wind. She went to the vault the house did not pretend to have, climbed the narrow stairs lit by lamp glow almost too faint to see, and found the cloth-wrapped shape. When as he unrolled it, she saw the black glass glimmer, unpretty, its edge the uneven beauty of broken stone polished by use. It had the delicacy of ice and the stubbornness of something found in the belly of a mountain and meant to outlast 1,000 winters. She slid it home in a thin leather sheath and bound it high on her left forearm where it would not catch her robe nor flash and betray her in dark. The harbor accepted the ship as a woman accepts a loved touch with outward indifference and inward heat. The hull eased away from the pilings without complaint. The ropes came up like snakes being charmed. She sat on a coil of line, anonymous as a gull, and looked at nothing until an old sailor with plaited hair stood near and grunted. The sailor's way of asking permission of a quiet without spoiling it. "You a mute?" he said after waiting longer than most would have. She looked like a girl of 18, brown hair braided close to the head, clothes plain, hands clean. She had learned to give to those who asked a face they expected. A mute was one such face to sailors. Superstitious, intriguing, harmless, good for luck if treated properly, bad for luck if mistreated. She lifted a hand and shook it minutely, neither yes nor no. "All right," he said. "We've had worse. We'll have worse again. Where you going, then?" She pointed up the length of the ship. "North." He nodded and spat neatly into the sea. "Everyone's going north these days, or they're going south as if wolves were on their own heels. And if they're smart, they're going west and finding a hole to hide in and hoping the winter eats someone else before it eats them. I've never seen it, girl. The sea throws up ice like teeth. Saw a man fall and shatter like glass. Funny to watch if you're the sort who laughs at the wrong time." He grinned. The grin was all gaps. "You're not that sort. I'll leave you be." She slept when she could and watched the water when she could not. It was late in autumn and the wind had the silver smell of something metal in its intentions. The sky learned its own hunger, and nights did not end cleanly but bled into days with a thin dull light in between. Sometimes gulls followed the ship. Sometimes only a strange, high sail showed for an hour or two and then vanished into a fall of fog. Once, close on midnight, a line of dolphins sketched their peaks just under the surface, never breaking, as if the sea smiled to itself in its sleep. They put in at Sisterton to drop a parcel wrapped in tarred cloth. She did not need to know the name of its contents. The name would not alter it, and names only made the bearer clumsy. And they put in at a little spit of coast where someone came out in a coracle and left a bag of dried apples and heavy cheese and seabird eggs the color of an old bruise. She never asked and no one told her. When a storm came the third week and the sail strained like a horse pulled too soon, She tied herself into a notch between two ribs of the ship and slept to the rhythm of boards groaning and water tramping the world. Land came at last like a whisper, then a rumor, then a shout. The shore was gray and broke the horizon with a low line of trees like someone's hair rising from sleep. They slid into White Harbor with the tide. The city writhed with winter, carts piled with furs, with salted fish, with candles the shape of fingers, with small, hunched people who could not afford any of it but came to look as if looking would warm them. The pale towers of the new keep kept their watch. Thick smoke crawled from great chimneys. The wind carried the smell of clean slaughter from some unseen yard where cattle gave themselves to salt and hooks. She stepped onto the quay and became a different girl. The twist of her hair changed the shape of her skull. The pinch of a new face softened her jaw and turned her mouth to a sullen line a little too full for innocence. She walked a fraction shorter. She let her shoulders round. The world knew her at a glance. A northern girl turned port rat turned a thing with quick fingers and no one who would claim her as kin. It was a good face. It moved smoothly, and the memories in it were winter tough and did not try to misguide her with echoes of kisses or phrases in another tongue. She moved among the market like water moves through a bucket of reeds, touching each stalk so gently none of them knew they had been touched. She ate hot barley and onion from a bowl shaped by a woman's rough hands and paid for it with a copper scuffed by many pockets. She bought a pair of mittens from an old man who smelled of lanolin and wet dog, and when he smiled, revealing a single tooth that looked like a child's pale shell, she smiled back and turned it into another expression halfway through so that neither of them had to recognize kindness for the dangerous commodity it was. At a corner where the city turned down toward a poorer quay, there was a boy with a wooden sword daring other boys to strike him. He had the wiry confidence of those who have never yet been beaten into a different shape. She watched him until his pride began to wobble, then drifted on. A black dog trotted at her heels for a while and then went its separate way. She slept that night in a loft over a tanner's where the skins hung like a battlefield and woke before dawn to a trumpet of geese and a woman screaming at someone to bring wood. The road north wanted to be a river. The wagons were that current. The people were its foam. She took a place among them without asking and without being asked. The faces didn't meet eyes. The bodies didn't touch except to jolt and mutter apology. She let the black glass ride against her arm and carried in her other sleeve a coil of wire and in her boot a flat, thin blade that would not show when she moved. She took only so much water as would keep her from shaking in the cold and ate when others did and slept with her back against boles of trees that exhaled the faint pine-sour brea. Th of long living. On the third day the snow began. It was nothing much at first, a polite interest that did not even trouble the sleep of those who wanted badly to sleep. On the fifth day, it became serious. The world narrowed to a tunnel and the tunnel dimmed and the dimness pressed the people inside it closer. An old woman died at dawn, her lap full of spilt peas. The leather thong that tied her hood pulled tight by a hand that had meant to be useful. The others wrapped her and left her under a stand of birch where the bark peeled in scrolls that looked, in that light, like an abandoned library. That night the wolves came near. They did not show their bodies. She heard their voices like bells rung behind a hill. They ran with her a while, just a while, before the wind took their song away. Once she had known the feeling of fur burning against the palm of her hand, a heat that was not fire but life, and the memory rose and dimmed before she could push it. If this were a world where the old things could remain the old things, the wolves would have come exactly as near as they had and no nearer, would have watched without imagining their own reflection in her eyes. But this world had begun to be a different shape than it had been, and such shapes make even clean hunger suspect. She let the memory go. The road went on. A man with a broken lute played on 3 strings. The tune was older than any who heard it. He would stop mid-verse, cough his chops raw, spit blood, and play again. A girl gave birth in a ditch, her cries small and apologetic, and when the child came silent the mother wept without sound as if trying not to wake a sleeping house. A priest in a rough robe passed like a man who dreams himself walking, his mouth moving. She did not ask his god to recognize her, and his god did not. At the last river the ice had begun to take the surface in sheets. Men went down to test it, stamping like boys, and 2 of them fell through with shouts that sounded like celebration until the shouts turned broken. She watched the rest throw ropes and reach with poles. They pulled one out and not the other. The one they recovered lay on the bank with colorless skin and eyes that seemed a little too interested in their reflection of the sky. He breathed again finally, drank, vomited, and wept. The other was gone in the quiet way water takes the taken. Past the river the world thinned. Farms became long patches of a different shade of white. The air grew lean. The sun vanished like a coin into a beggar's mouth and did not reappear for long. She slept rolled into blankets with her dagger arm turned to a stranger's back so that the heat from that back could do the taking that heat does. Once, at morning, she rose and found Frost had sewn her lid to her cheek and had to warm the place with her finger to free it. Her finger left a damp patch that seemed, in that moment, the most beautiful thing in the world. Winterfell rose out of snow the way bones rise out of meat boiled too long. Stubborn, articulate, unchanged by whatever had tried to cook it into something else. She did not go near its girlhood familiarities. A name that once would have carried her through a gate now would have snagged like a torn thread on every splinter. She was not that name. The house was afire she did not put her hands to. She passed it in the night and let its breath warm her face at a distance. The way one passes an oven door and feels the heat and continues on. It was there she found what she needed, not at the keep itself but in the brutal little industry that had grown under its shadow. Charcoal burners. Smiths who had been farmers and were not good at this work but were better than nothing. A boy no older than she had been when she first learned to move like a shadow stood over a crate of black glass with the hungry pride of one who believes he holds power. He watched men load spearheads, watched them badly, and pretended, because it pleased him, not to be afraid of what those spearheads meant. She bought none of it. She spoke to no one. But when a wagon stalled in a drift and the men struggled and it seemed a curse might teach the wood to splinter if a hand did not teach it to hold, she helped. She took a shoulder beside three others and felt the old machine of teamwork right itself. She lifted and held and pushed with her feet like a plow beast until the wheels took their purchase and the wagon lurched. In the confusion, no one saw her hand go shrewdly into the sack she had external permission to touch and internal permission to take from. She left them with what they needed and took one small thing more than they would count. When she looked at the thing later, in the pocket of her sleeve, under the dictionaries of leather and bone, she saw it was a shard of black glass shaped like an icicle, perfect as a secret, the length of her hand. She lay 2 nights in a stable loft smelling of sour hay and warm horse while snow found its way through the cracks and made patterns on the rough boards that looked like maps of rivers that had never existed. On the 3rd day, she walked out of the world of walls. The road beyond Winterfell bled into wilderness, and the wilderness had a memory. The wind knew where the stones lay and sought them. The sky retracted like a hand from a stove. Her breath grew very low. She taught her blood to go slow. She taught her skin to feel nothing. She watched the line of her footprints go behind her and vanish under the next fall of flakes, as if she were a thought the world had decided not to think anymore. She found the free folk where the trees thinned and the hills began. They had made of survival an artistry that no one cared to patronize. They moved the way rain moves across rock, inevitable, patterned by topography. She wore the face of a woman who had died 2 years ago, a woman who had been quick in speech and quicker in temper, who had left a child to a sister and taken her fierce mow. To a hunt she did not return from. The face fit. She tied back her hair with hide and wore furs that did not flatter. And when they looked at her, they saw one of their own and not a problem they had to dedicate blood to. They told stories when they walked. Stories were meat and shield both. She ate them the way she ate the dried meat, quietly, asking for nothing and leaving nothing. A boy told of a thing he had seen near the old weirwood. A blue shape that did not disturb snow when it moved and did not sweat when it worked a door. A woman, hard and light as flint, laughed and told him he had seen winter itself and mistaken it for an enemy with a face. Then she grew sober and spoke of a village where fires had burned all at once as if a hand had come down and snuffed the lid, then lifted it again quickly. Out, then in, with no thought spent on the lives inside that rhythm. An old man said nothing for 2 days and then on the 3rd day said, to no one, once there were the children, and they were not children as we mean it, and winter was an agreement. And now there is no agreement, and that is why the old things sit up in their places and look around. On the 6th day of walking with them, she saw the river become a floor. The far bank wore a thin line of trees like stitches in a wound. The ice bore the semi-solid sheen of an excuse that wanted to be a reason. They went over at a point where the current drowsed beneath. She felt the cold climb her legs through her boots and into her knees. An intelligent, patient cold. She walked slower and thought smaller thoughts. If she could have thought no thoughts at all, she would have. But the mind had to scratch at itself to make sure it was not buried. She scratched with the tiniest possible movement. An old song hummed in the part of her where the breath kept its own counsel. They slept in a ring beneath a beach that had made its peace with wind so long ago it no longer seemed like surrender. They laid their bodies so that their backs were covered and their fronts faced the world, and the world faced them in return. And in the middle of them they left a place for a fire that never grew above the size of a man's two hands cupped around a child's cheeks. Sparks went up like small, brave requests. She listened with her body. The world made a sound like a finger going around the rim of a glass. At some point after midnight she woke from the sort of not sleep one has in such places and knew that something larger than weather moved. She rose without lifting her head and slid her hand along her left forearm to feel the sheath and the dumb weight of the black glass waiting. She touched, not to comfort herself, but to remember the exact measurement of the tool. Then she closed her eyes and taught her blood to be this quiet the mouse the owl never hears. They came when it was nothing like dawn and nothing like the deepest night. The dead had no interest in human hours. They came without the discourtesy of noise, the polite cruelty of snow to cover their steps. The free folk moved like a wound waking. She did not draw the blade. A blade in the wrong breath betrayed the hand that drew it, and blades, like dogs, could be loyal to the wrong master if one spoke the wrong word at the wrong time. She waited until a shape passed between two others, and in that sliver of darkness behind the second she slid from herself to that place. She did not try to kill. That was not her task. That night was a lesson in approach and dismissal. She wanted to feel the cold's attention on the back of her neck, so she would know it when it came again at a different angle. She slipped among them and felt the way they felt the living, like a blind man's hand moving over a table to find the cup by its warmth. She made herself be nothing that could be felt. The trick was not to imitate death. The trick was to be wind, to be a form the world made for itself when it needed the leaves to move. She had learned long ago to align breath with silence. Now she aligned heat with cold, taught it to cling to her bones, taught her blood to stay deep, taught her skin to be an indifferent thing. The dead moved past. The free folk fought with fire and black glass and the stubborn habit of not wanting their children to be cold. She slid with the shapes. She could not see him. He was not a king with a banner and a crown of iron and an ego that wanted introduction. He was a principle. He was the thought behind 1,000 gestures. He would be where the movement of the whole bent around a point, the way fish will show you where the rock is as they sluice around it, the way wind will reveal the shape of a ruin before your eyes do. The seventh night, if night had meaning, she saw it. They were moving east, following a low ridge that was like the back of an animal sleeping under a blanket. The sky had learned to make no color of its own and had handed the job of color entirely to things below it. The snow was not blue or gray. It was what it was. She felt the dead move like grammar around a sentence. She followed the sentence to its subject. He did not stop snow. Snow changed its mind near him. He did not cast light. The absence of light near him became an argument. He had a shape because even principles in the world learn that shape is a convenience, and the shape pleased the dead because they could look at it and know what to admire. His hair, if it was hair, shifted in the air that did not trouble him. His eyes were not blue, not the blue of the day sky, nor the blue of good ice, nor the blue of a child's bead. It was a color that had never learned its name because the sort of life that gives things their names had been scraped away wherever he had stood. She did not think of stabbing. A stab was a thought like the ones his servants had, and a thought like theirs had to be unlearned for this to be done. She thought instead of the shape of his walk, the length of his arms, the way the world bent or him as if he carried pressure. She thought of the black glass and of its preference for cracks and of the moment when brittle becomes daggerful. She thought of him in the way the kindly one had taught her, as a ledger come to be balanced, as a wall with a number chalked on it and a man with a sponge, as a task to be done in proper order. She followed not too near and not too far as he came into a birch stand older than memory. Birch, which peeled itself and offered its skin, which was a tree much like her in its way, since it loved the knife. The stand veined the air with white. The snow accepted them without question. The dead moved to stand around the principle that moved like a man. Their breath, which was not breath, made a sound that had the shape of breathing if breathing had been invented by ice. There was a thing in him that believed in display. It was small, but it was there. He turned so that the world could see him if it wished. He looked upon the ranks that were only ways of arranging himself. He lifted his hand in the smallest of motions, and that motion told the dead to move again. She put one hand in the place where breath lived and squeezed the organ there until its beat was not a beat anymore but an idea, and then not even that. She had learned to do it in summer, kneeling in the tiled room where water ran down old channels cut by hands that did not know the names of kings. It hurt. The body wanted to live. But the body had been told more interesting stories in this house than the ones most girls were told, and it had learned to be interested in those. She became cold as the inside of the earth and light as a leaf. Then she ran. Not the way a child runs to the gate, but the way a knife runs between ribs. It was a run composed of stillnesses. She moved when the world did. She went where it was already going. The wind took the sound from her and the snow took the evidence. Her face had been one face. She wore another. Her body had been one body. It became the exact height and line of the dead woman she had legislated herself to resemble. She passed between two ranks and did not trouble the air. She had been born to the art of going fast, to the joy of speed, to the laughter some find when feet strike ground in the right cadence and the right measure. She kept the joy under glass and did not look at it. She was the tool and the tool was going home. She approached the place where his back would be. He turned. Of course he turned. Pride had made him more dangerous and less. Pride had taught him to admire the thing that might hurt him. He looked upon the quiet among the movement. She felt that look like a frost that tried to paint its story across her skin. She taught her skin not to be story. She jumped. Jumps are also made of stillnesses. The moment of leaving, the hanging that is a kind of argument with gravity, the arrival that is a kind of handshake that breaks the wrist. She had made a study of jumps since she was 9 years old. Across streams and between walls and onto moving carts and away from hands that meant kindness and hands that meant harm and hands that meant to teach her a lesson she did not want. She had learned the measure of the jump that appears trivial and the one that ruins you if you misjudge by half a finger. He watched her as one watches an insect, not contemptuous, not fascinated, more like a man measuring whether a speck of dust means he must close a window. His hand moved toward her, a lazy acceptance of the truth that everything in the world was now arranged to easily be whatever he wanted. The touch in the air where that hand moved was terrible. It was the original cold. It was a promise extracted from the world when it was too young to disagree. She did not put the black glass in his chest. That was where everyone put their important things, and important things are expected, and expectation is the enemy of survival. Someone had made of him a symbol of the heart, and symbols are always lies that teach truths. She put the black glass where binding lives, low and slightly left of the spine, where the knot of every animal's movement lives, where the coil that unwinds when we stand upright begins its turning. She went past his hand by not being where his hand believed her to be. She was not above it, nor below it, nor beside it. She was in an older geometry whose points were in the mistakes of all other shapes. The blade met him without sound. There was no scream. There was a kind of acknowledgement, the way when you cut something made badly, a second thing presents itself, cleanly made under the first. His body, if it could be called that, turned into a lesson in angles. Frost flew backward as if each shard were trying to rewrite the history of water. The dead paused. They were a sentence awaiting the loss of an important word. She landed and rolled and did not look to see her work. Looking is vanity. She slid between two ranks that had not yet found their new subject and felt them begin to learn that there was no longer a subject and falter and look for instruction that would never come again. She moved through a copse where the snow was piled like books no one would read, and from there into wind the trees had managed to keep for themselves. The sound came a long time later, or instantly. Time bent, too, when that thing ended. It sounded like a field cracking under a sun that had not yet risen. It sounded like a place exhaling that had been holding its breath since the day it was made. Some of the dead fell and did not stir. Some of them took another step out of habit and then forgot what steps were for. Some of them turned, as if to speak to someone who had always stood behind them. She did not turn to see. She ran with a different run, one that had breath in it and joy under glass where the glass had a crack. She did not take off the face she wore. She did not pull the dagger from its sheath and use it to clear ice from a fissure or scrape snow from a boot. She did not hold it out in any supplicant gesture to any god that might be watching. She did not think of gods. The god of her house was a ledger. The only prayer that ledger approved was balance. She put distance under her. She measured nothing. The birches ended. The world took on the strange brightness of snow that has decided to be a mirror rather than a pillow. When at last she stopped, it was because the presence of her legs was beginning to overshadow the absence of her breath. And the absence mattered more. She hid. Hiding is an art no one praises. Most praise the braver arts, which are easier and more theatrical. Hiding requires an understanding of yourself as scenery and of the world as predator, and of a kind of surrender that is not a loss but an insistence on result. She hid under a tumbled place where the roots of an old tree made a small room the world had forgotten. She took care to place her body so that no raised snow betrayed her rest, and so that melt would not trickle down and tell an attentive creature more than she meant it to. She closed her eyes and did not sleep and imagined a bead of water traveling down a string. She lay thus through a twilight that might have been dawn and a dawn that might have been noon and a noon that might have been the first hour of the afternoon. The world around her made its accounting. She heard nothing massive move. She heard small things begin to be small again. The sound of a jay's complaint, a fox misplacing its foot and trying not to show it, the rasp of wind on bark. If the great hand had lifted, if the pressure had gone, if the balance had twitched itself back into a more natural position, the world would do this. It would begin again in the minor keys before attempting a major note. She did not emerge until the light was nothing and then a little less than nothing. Her legs found her again, the way a horse finds a familiar hand. The air stung, but not with malice. She walked south without calling it south, because names catch in the teeth. She met no dead and passed 2 living people who had wrapped themselves in the gray of fear until they looked like small boulders tossed onto the plain. She walked wide around them so her heat could not teach their fear to talk. Past the ridgeline, the snow became a quilt and not a floor. She began to taste smoke in the air, not the heart of it, but the story that goes before it, the way a scent precedes its substance. She came upon a camp late in the evening and stood in its outermost shadow considering its shape. Firelight lay in braids on the ground. Someone had hung a pot from a green stick, and the smell of its steam was the sort of smell that makes a person cry if no one is watching. There were 3 men and 2 women and a child. The child's head had been shaved and was growing back in like fur. One of the men had a beard that had seated itself on his face like a king on a throne. They saw her and then saw her. The second seeing is the important one. "Come in," the bearded man said, not an invitation, an instruction given to a branch in the wind. He held a black glass spear in his hand. The spear had been wrapped with leather and set with iron at the butt, so it could do something if it was dropped. He looked like someone who would drop nothing. "If you don't mean ill." She walked into the edge of the light and let it make whatever it would of her face. Faces are stories. She let this one be the story of a woman who had learned to walk alone because she had had to. The woman with the pot gave her a piece of flat cake and a ladle of stew so thick the spoon stood in it. She did not thank. "Thanks build webs. We're going south," one of the men said, "because people fill silence with direction. That's where people go when the sky turns to iron. South." She ate her stew and the cake and did not say that south was only sometimes better than north, and that the more people believed it, the less true it became. The child watched her with slow interest, as if studying a bird. Children know what adults are taught to forget. She let the child look. She gave nothing back in return. "You've the look of the true north," the bearded man said, examining her furs the way a hunter examines prints. "You know the other side of the wall. You could guide us. We'll pay in gratitude and food until we find more to pay with. We won't hurt you. Not for lack of want, maybe, but for lack of heart. He spoke as if his heart were a thing the world had to do with, and not as if he had anything to do with his heart. She examined him and saw the truth of his voice's weight. He would not hurt her for sport or out of boredom. He would hurt her if the world asked him to, and he decided the asking had merit. "You need not cross that wall," she said, and heard her voice, the sort that makes a soft sound and still goes very far. "I have passed something on the road. It will not be as it has been." "You mean the wind will suddenly grow bored with making knives of itself?" the woman asked. She had a mouth like a healed wound. She was not unkind. She had no time for hope that did not heat a pot. "I mean," she said, "that some debts have been called." The bearded man put down his spear so that it made the sound iron makes on stone. He put his hand to his face as if it had become strange and wanted to be reminded of itself. He looked toward the north where the sky has no town to reflect and saw nothing. Men like that are taught to gravitate toward nothing as toward a bell. He lifted his hand and opened his mouth and closed it and opened it again with a word hanging on it like a drop of water struggling with surface tension. He didn't say it. The world didn't need his word for it. He returned his attention to the stew the way men have always done when the words are too many and the tasks are exact. She slept there and did not sleep. In the morning she left without eating. The woman gave her another pie, of cake, and did not look at her when she did so, which is the true way to give. She took it. She set her feet in the direction the road remembered even when the road was gone under white. Winterfell arose again, slower now. The world between distances had altered. Folk moved with a way of standing that was like an animal whose bandage has been removed and who no longer expects pain with the movement of a joint. The wind still had teeth. It no longer had a throat. She came near to the great house and smelled its smoke again and told herself the smoke was anyone's. She told herself the smoke was not a letter written out with each curl, spelling out syllables she had been trained to ignore. She stood in a place where she could see the old gods would. The leafless limbs were scribbles against a sky grown faintly honest about the hour. She could see, between two oaks whose bones had learned the venue of wind, the pale trunk of a weirwood that had learned to be patient with red in a world that had taken that color mostly away for the season. Her chest felt unusual. It took her many breaths to realize the place with the taut quiet was becoming soft, that the body, having done the hard thing asked of it, was daring to attempt something else. She walked forward a few steps, then stopped so that the world could go around her without thinking it had been impeded. There were voices. Some carried orders. Some carried the weightless, broken laughter of people who discover they can laugh and test the fact to make sure it does not go away. She stood where she would be no one and listened to children shout at one another with seriousness. She listened to a soldier explain to another soldier what shapes of black glass worked and what shapes didn't, though neither of them would hold a spear again that month. She listened to a woman cry into her apron, a sound only the apron was meant to hear. If she brought herself to the gate, a guard would see her and would see not the woman who had walked with the free folk, but a child who had only recently learned that the world would not fight fair. If she spoke, the cadence would betray her. If she passed without being noticed, the house itself would know, because houses know the shapes of those who belong to them and become slightly warmer when those shapes cross their threshold. She did none of those. She went to the crypts. It was a place where voices went to learn the weight of themselves. The air tasted of damp rock and iron and something else which she did not let herself name. She passed the statues by touching none of them. Her feet remembered where the reliefs rose and the floor dipped, and where the torches had been set by hands that thought them important, and where the corners would hold a shadow against even such faint light. She counted nothing. She measured nothing. She whispered nothing. The black glass sat easy against her arm. She slid it free without looking at it. A blade is more faithful in the hand that does not regard it. She knelt and held it between both hands at the level of her chest as if the blade were a thought. As if by holding it thus the thought would not embarrass itself and spill. She began to understand, by the shape of her own face around her own skull, that something in the world had altered when the principle in the birch stand became a lesson in angles. She did not know what would come to take the place of that alteration. The world abhors a hole as much as it abhors an extra weight. The ledger never displays blank entries for long. Her breath returned. She let it. Her blood resumed living. She allowed it to. She leaned her forehead briefly to the cold stone paired to look like a face of a man who would not approve if he could disapprove. She did not tell him she had done something brave. She did not tell him she had done something foolish. She did not tell him anything, because he could teach her nothing now and because she had made herself a tool for a longer hand. When she rose, she found herself facing the exit and the long, dark line of stair. She turned and saw, a few statues down, a shape that might have been only a trick of light or might have been a man whose eyes knew winter too well. He did not speak. Faces are only so obedient. She let her face be the face of the woman from beyond the wall, the one with the sore hands and the mouth that had forgotten how to be soft. The man watched her until he had convinced himself she was a stranger, and then he shifted the weight of his grief and left. She spent the next days doing small things. Small things were the spine of the world. She pulled a child's boot from a drift with 2 branches and left it in a visible place where a mother might find it and know. Finally, what had happened and whether to keep hoping. She repaired a fence that would not keep anything out but would give a man's hands something to do besides curse. She stood in a line and took an oaten bread and did not eat it. She left it on a sill where a boy would pick it up without looking around and not be ashamed. She took the black glass and cleaned it with snow and oil and did not draw attention to the act. In one of the yards, a woman held public court with a calm whose origin was not in a god but in an understanding of arithmetic. So much flour, so much wood, so many hands, so many mouths. The woman's hair was dark and shone without vanity. Her eyes belonged to the sort of mind that knows that dignity is not pride. She judged 2 men who had fought over a log and told them each they were fools in a tone that allowed them to be grateful to be told so. The woman would have recognized her if the world were the sort of place where such recognitions are permitted. The world had been asked to be different this week and did not risk another difference. At night, she lay beneath a roof of riven boards and watched the sky through a crack as wide as her thumb. The stars were too clear, as though the air had been washed too many times and lost the film that protects the eye. She thought of the kindly one and of his hands and of the way he never wasted a syllable. She considered whether the house would wish to see her again and whether her feet would obey if the house did not wish it. She thought, reluctantly, as one thinks of a thing that will cut if handled wrong, of the meeting near the birches and of how the black glass had slid as if obeying an old law. She thought of the way her body now felt, quieter in its smallest places, as if it had learned a new music. In the morning, a raven arrived at one of the outbuildings and strutted with proprietary detail like someone who has written a letter and now wants to watch the reader read. She turned her face to not be a face and watched without watching. A boy who had been told his duty and accepted it with the high seriousness of youth took the small cylinder from the bird's leg. He carried it to the woman with the arithmetic. The woman read. Her mouth became a line so thin it might as well have been nothing. Then she breathed out. Her breath made a cloud, and that cloud told the world that the breath had warmed it, and that warmth had warmed the world in a way that mattered. No word, a man nearby said, pressing, as men will, for the thing that makes them feel like they are part of the story. No word from the south? Word from the north, the woman replied. Something has shifted. The enemy is scattered. The ones who remain do not know who they are supposed to be. They are breaking against the trees like water. We do not know why. The man swallowed. His Adam's apple went up and down as if it had never done the work before. And you think it will hold? I do not think, she said. I count. I adjust the sums when the numbers change. For now, the sum is different. She looked, not at the woman standing in the crowd that was not a crowd, disguised by her not looking, but through her. She put the cylinder away. She turned and began to tell people the small things they needed to hear, which were the only things people can live on. Who will bring wood? Who will chop it? Who will be first to step back if arguments turn to the sort of heat that does not warm anyone? The arithmetic of the living resumed. The ledger of the house far away took its own notes. She felt, in the still water where her breath had lived during the work, a ripple that was not hers. The house would want to know how the scale had settled. The house would want to peer at her and see whether she had stolen anything from no one and begun again to carry someone in her hands. The house would not punish her for that theft if the theft made the ledger add. The house might punish her if the theft made her put herself in the lines where no selves should be. She had no certainty of anything except that there were going to be more sums to be done. In a corner of that yard, a smith's apprentice fumbled with a ring of chain and swore softly as the rivet slid in a direction it should not. She went and put her hand on his wrist to steady it, and pressed without instruction so that the tool fell into the right angle, and caught his eye, and then let her own eyes go unfocused so she would be only instruction and not person. He breathed and smiled and made something that would hold. She left before he could say any syllable that might become a debt. Days ripened and fell. The air grew a little more forgiving, as if the sky had decided to move one finger. Refugees walked less like ghosts and more like people who had been ghosts and were volunteering to be human again. The wolves came closer at night, and now their song had curiosity in it. Men who had been brave and men who had been terrified slept beside one another and dreamed the same dream. A field that had been a mirror, and then a floor, and then a quilt, and a hand rising from the surface and then not rising after all. Once, in the shadow of the inner wall, she saw a boy with hair dark as a crow's wing gazing at the snow with disappointment. He put his hand into it and pulled a handful up and regarded it as if it had betrayed him. Then he shook it out and laughed as if he had been the betrayer and not the betrayed. She passed him and did not allow the flame near it any fuel. She had done a task. She had not mended herself. Those were different economies. She went into the godswood at dusk. The dusk there had a different temperature to it than the dusk outside. The pale trunk contemplated the day it had been given, and its red leaves clung like thoughts that refused to be dismissed even by old minds. She stood, just a shape among shapes, and waited for the tree to stop trying to be a symbol and become a tree again. Sometimes trees knew old things that people had not yet learned how to carry. Sometimes they knew nothing and people used them to hear themselves. The air changed. She did not shift. A foot on snow makes a certain sound. A foot in difficulty makes a different sort. The one who came did not make either. He made the sound of an object moved by careful hands. He came to stand beside her without assuming even an inch more ground than anyone had given him. "You do not pray," he said. His voice held a patience she had heard only in truly wounded men. "Neither do I. The gods do as they will without our words. Words are small," she said. She had chosen a voice that could have been any of 100 women's voices. His attention did not sharpen at it. His attention had learned to be gentle, or the world had beaten it into gentleness. The man, like the tree, had been tended by winter. He wore it as one wears a scar, not as adornment, not as shame. His eyes had seen what had to be seen to do arithmetic of a more complicated kind. He lifted a hand and almost touched the smooth, carved veins of the weirwood, deciding against it at the last inch. He breathed, a soft cloud. He looked into the leaves for a long time, as if looking into a controlled burn. "There was something," he said. "Not a victory. The word isn't right. The world shook in a place I was not, and then did not shake in that place. I wondered if that shaking had a human shape in it. Then I remembered that such shapes rarely have kindness in them, and perhaps it is better not to know what shapes to thank. There was a shaking," she said carefully. "Children stop crying when they are given bread, not when they are told the names of the bakers." He smiled, small and unready and gone as soon as it had been brave enough to appear. "I have loved children for their clarity," he said. "They look and know the thing is bare and say bare and then run." He turned, not too quickly, to look at her. He did not see under her face. No one did unless she wished them to, and even then only those who had stubborn eyes for realities. He saw a woman from beyond walls with a mouth like a cut and a way of standing that had learned to muffle joy. He nodded to her with the courtesy of someone who is killed as little as possible and sees that this is rare. "If you know any bakers," he said, and the softness of the joke did not clatter as soft jokes often do in poor hands, "tell them to keep their ovens lit." She watched him walk out of the wood. He did not look back. Men who believe themselves watched are vain or feared. He was neither, not today. She stood until night had a hand in every corner. Then she left and found the place she slept and did not dream. In the days that followed, the news ran thin and then thick and then thin. What had stood northward and behaved like one obedience behaved now like a handful of arguments. The free folk sent smoke signals that were not signals anymore, but the leftover habit of a language they no longer needed to speak. Birds flew with small bits of nothing tied to their legs and stood around upon arrival as if they had done nothing at all. South crowded the roads less urgently. North loosened its shoulders. Men who had lost sons put down their grief for an hour and did mending. And when the grief returned, it did not sit quite so very close. The house sent no message. Or it sent one in a way that could not be seen in this air. She waited. Waiting is action. Others mistake it for idleness because they cannot see the weight lifted by a back that does not move, nor the precision by which a fisherman chooses the hour he does not cast. She bathed in water that was almost warm and almost clean. She stitched and unstitched a tear in a glove to keep her hands honest. She watched a man build a sled and learned from the way his body folded that he had once been a dancer, and from the way his hands moved that he had once played an instrument, and from the way he glanced at the people passing that he had once been hit too many times to entirely trust quiet. When the raven came, it came at a strange light that could not make up its mind to be dawn or dusk. She recognized its letter by the way the air around it seemed to get itself ready to accommodate a different piece of arithmetic. She watched the boy take the cylinder and run, slipping, and then recover with the over-serious dignity of youth. The letter went to the woman who counted. The woman read. This time, when she folded the parchment, she looked toward the godswood as one looks toward the door one expects a knock at. That night she returned to the weirwood and found on the ground in front of it something that had not been there before. It lay like a snake shedding its skin. A narrow strip of felt wrapped around a piece of paper wrapped around something that, when she picked it up, weighed more than it should have. The felt was old. The paper smelled of walls. Inside the paper, bound with sensible string, lay a coin. On one side was a face that looked nowhere. On the other side was a word that belonged to a language that had sworn never to write names and broken its own oath enough to be understandable to those who needed it. She put the coin on her palm and looked at it until it was only weight and shape and not a symbol. Then she wrapped it in its paper and its felt and returned it to the ground for someone else's story. The string had wrapped around the piece of paper in a way that would tell a very particular hand that it had been opened and closed. She tied it in exactly that way and left it as exactly that thing. The ledger did not need signatures elaborate or obvious. It required only that those who kept it be able to tell a thing had occurred. She left a hair caught under the string. The hair told the ledger a woman had been here who could do certain things and would do certain other things if asked. She left nothing else. In the morning she went to the market and listened to a man with a gray cap tell fish lies in a voice tuned to draw coin. She let his voice walk through her until a phrase sat in the place where her careful breath had sat those nights ago. Every debt paid, the phrase said, in the cadence of an old prayer that was not supposed to be spoken aloud. She took the prayer into a place inside her where it would be quiet and purchased a length of cord and a handful of needles and a meat pie a woman had made with more hard work than skill, and ate the pie and felt grateful in the way that does not demand thought. In the afternoon, at the far wall, she found a man who remembered her only as a face that happens to be near him often. He had once had a scar that would have made a child ask for the story, and he had once had a wife who would have warned the child not to. Now he had neither. He had a knot in his shoulder and a way of standing too straight when he began to feel cold. She stood beside him and watched men hammer one long beam into its place on the palisade and listened when he spoke. There was a night, he said, as if she had asked, when it was so quiet I could hear my mother stirring porridge. She has been dead 15 years. It was not a dream. I had my eyes open and had a ladle in my hand, and the ladle was cold. I think about that quiet when the wind is too much. It helps. He laughed, surprised by himself. Everything helps that helps now. She nodded. Helping was an arithmetic. She could respect arithmetic. The woman who counted sent for her not by name but by expectation. A boy came to the far wall and sought out a face without knowing why he sought it. He lingered near and looked up and found her eyes because it was time to find her, and because those who knew the ledger knew how to allow those whose hands were supposed to take things to find them. She went with the boy through the inner places and into the warm room where the woman kept a board on which she made marks and then erased the marks and made new ones. I do not know what to call you, the woman said without contentiousness. So I won't call you anything. She pushed a small parcel across the table without touching it for too long. Her nails had dirt ground into them, but clean dirt. Someone asked that this be placed for someone who would know to come to the place where it was placed and be the someone who would take it. I am the ghost in the middle of a transaction that is none of my business. The parcel was heavy and had the consistency of cloth and metal together. She opened it carefully, letting the string find its own untying. Within lay a glove of leather lined with something smoother than fur, and within that glove, tucked along the seam, lay a sliver of black glass so fine she could see her own eyelashes reflected in it when she held it just so. The glove had been made to be worn under other gloves, unsuspicious, invisible. The sliver had been made, she understood, in a place where hammers were polite to rocks and men asked the world to do what they wanted and the world sometimes said yes. "Do you know where it came from?" she asked, not expecting an answer. "I know where things end up," the woman said. "That is my expertise. Their beginnings are too many." She slipped into the glove while standing perfectly still. It was a good fit. The sliver slid into a pocket designed for it. If she clenched her fist and then loosened it, the sliver would nestle between finger and thumb without peeping its presence. She bowed her head to the woman. The woman waved her away and went back to her marks, which had minds of their own. She could have sailed east that day and gone back to the hall where the water had its memory and the pillars were bones, and the kindly one measured the world by breaths. She did not. The ledger had indicated nothing. The ledger had left a coin and a glove in silence, which are not an answer but are part of one. She had done her part. More parts were likely. Balance is not a line one draws and leaves. It is a beam one walks sleeplessly, and she had promised in the softest part of her that she would not climb down while her feet were capable. She moved through the keep and its outer world like a rumor. People who carry rumors feel important. She felt nothing of the sort. In the armory, a man whose left ear had been cut off near his head taught a boy to wind the bowstring without nicking the bow. She stood and watched the angle of his hand and corrected the boy with a nudge touch. The man with the missing ear grunted and went on. In the kitchen, a woman stirred with a wooden paddle that had been cut from a whiter wood than the rest and wore smooth for generations. She moved closer to the hearth without seeming to take a little of the heat inside her coat. She shivered and made a face at her own treacherous body and shivered again. No one saw her. In the stable, a horse that had known only one master and missed him paced the stall with a measure that was not madness but was grief. She put her hand out and let the horse sniff at it and did not move. When the horse put its warm weight into her palm, she took nothing from it but the warmth and the brief knowledge that a living thing could enjoy her without finding in her any story that would oblige either of them to be anything new. She left as she always left, leaving behind nothing, taking only what had no owner. On the 5th day after the birch grove, near noon, the world practiced being itself again and almost succeeded. Men returned with wood. Children ran errands and were paid with the sorts of payments children find more noble than coin. A smile, a joke, a chance to be included in the knotting of rope. The woman who counted spoke less because others had learned to do the counting aloud with her. A raven arrived and no one ran. A raven was again a bird. In the distance, someone sang a song about a fish that grew too big to be eaten and ate the fisherman and married his boat. The song was dirty and the children pretended not to understand it. In such a place, the arithmetic of the house far away had room to write another sum. She felt it when she woke before dawn with her hand clenched around nothing. It had the quality of the very first time a child realizes that their own foot can be made to move. It was not a voice but a pressure. It put her feet into her boots without telling them and put her hand into the glove without fuss and woke her body to an alertness that did not taste of fear. She went to the inner gate. A boy who would have stopped anyone forgot to stop her. A man who would have told her there was nothing good beyond the walls told a story instead to his companion about a woman who had lit a hearth with a handful of shavings and a prayer, and how the shavings had done more than the prayer, which only proved that one should pray accordingly. She walked into the woods and then beyond the woods, toward the hills where the skulls of old disasters lay under shallow snow, and when she came to a place where the wind ran low, she stopped because it was not the right place to stop, which is how you learn where the right place is. He waited where the world was thinner. Waiting never makes men braver and never makes them cowards either. He stood. He was not a principle, and he was not a symbol. He was a messenger, and he had come with a message no one but she could hear and understand. He wore a face she had once known to hide her own. The face of a man in whose mouth kindness and cruelty had found themselves next-door neighbors and were content with the arrangement. "You have done what was required," he said. He did not say it with praise, which would have devalued both them. "Others will try to live with the change. A space made by that removal will ask to be filled. The house will not decide how it is filled, but it will count what it costs. You will be called to places where the world tilts and will be asked to place small stones under it until it tilts back. The first of those places is here." She looked around them at a landscape that had survived more true winters than anyone who was alive could count. The hills were old shoulders. The trees were bones put up out of earth to make a kind of parabola under the sky. The wind did what it always does with authority. It kept talking. "Here is large," she said. She had intended not to speak, then found that her voice had become part of the arithmetic whether she wanted it or not. "Here is where it begins," he said, "not where it ends. Ends are easy. Anyone can make a stopping if he wishes. You will be required to keep something going. The ledger doesn't only subtract." She felt, then, the tiredness arrive. Not the tiredness of muscle, but the tiredness of a mind which has been kept under glass, and must now be put to a new school. A mind that must learn how to be flesh again, to move in and among those who will attempt to make it into a person. She closed her eyes and opened them and did not sigh, because sighs are indulgences and she had set indulgence aside a long time ago. "What shall the bill say?" she asked. "When it is added up?" He smiled. He had a face that could smile in ways that did not help anyone. Now his smile was plain as a hand. "It will say, 'Every debt paid,'" he said. "It will say, 'Winter will eat the rest it is owed and then go sleep.' It will say, 'Names are not none, but they are not the whole of anyone.' It will say, 'If the world is to be healed, small things feed the patient and large things make him sick.' It will say, 'This one did what needed doing and then continued to do the next small thing.' That is the only praise we ever record." He stopped. He looked past her toward the south. The trees told him nothing. The sky told him less. He held his hands out as if to show the empty palms. The message was inside them, but was not palms and not words. He was not kind and not unkind. He was the house. She nodded. She had a glove on one hand and a coin in a place she would never need to touch, because touching it would remind her of more than money. She had a dark shard laid now along a seam. She had a joke in her throat about bakers she could deploy if the world required it. She had a run still in her legs that would have to wait to be asked for. She went back through the wood with its red leaves and its pale trunk and the whispers people put into its memory like coins into a poor box. She went past the market with its fish lies and its moving arithmetic and its children who did not know they had been spared something that would linger forever in the edges of their parents' faces. She went into the yard where soldiers practiced hitting straw and missing the point. She went to the far wall and watched the sky. She did not think of victory. She did not think of defeat. She held her body like the beam holds the man who is learning to walk it. She let the winter be what it would and did not ask it for more than that. She could feel the balance hum in the smallest places, the way a plucked string hums long after the audible sound has left the room. She waited for the next correction and taught her breath to be ready. A girl with a ribbon tied around her wrist came and stood beside her. The ribbon had once been red and now it was the color of old wood. The child did not look at her. The child looked at the world under the world and hummed something that might have been a lullaby for a thing that never sleeps. She did not tell the child to hush. She did not say her humming would wake a god. She did not say that gods do not wake for such small sounds. When the humming stopped, the child spoke without removing her eyes from the horizon. "Someone told me it would all be taken," the child said, matching the notion to the air. "But it was not. Not today," she said. "Tomorrow?" the child asked, a scholar of gambles in the making. "We will count when we get there," she said, and the child nodded, satisfied, and left, as one leaves a room where the next lesson will be, and she stayed, as one stays to sweep the chalk dust off the floor. She stood with the gloves seam against her palm. She stood with snow underfoot. She stood with the memory of a birch stand in a place where snow had no opinion and had learned one too quickly. She stood with the house's pressure quiet in a place under her sternum. She stood with no name for anyone to call, and with a task that had more than one edge. A raven landed on the wall 10 paces from her and cocked its head and said nothing for a long time and then laughed the way ravens do, which is to say, as if they are pretending to be something that laughs and are not sure if the pretense is convincing. The laugh went away up into the cold and did not return. She thought of the coin under felt and of the way the string makes the knot that tells the finger what it has done. She thought of the many faces in the hall that did not look at anyone and the one face that had been placed on a litter and taught her something about a map. The world had altered. It would have to be altered again, and then held steady, and then altered a little more, and none of these alterat. Ions would be of the sort that makes a song that speaks its own triumphant name. She had been a girl once. She had been no one for longer than she could measure. She was a tool now, and sometimes in lonely moments when her guarding grew thin, she believed she was also the hand. In the long corridor of afternoon, she left the wall and went to the place where soup was ladled, and she took a spoon in a slow hand, and she stood where the line was thickest and the temper was worst, and she ladled until the pot was light. She helped a woman change a baby's cloth and kept her eyes respectfully elsewhere. She stitched 2 cloaks into one. She set a broken broom to rights with wire and her patience. She swept up the chalk dust in a room that was all more or less numbers and left the small fan of her strokes where some neat mind would pause to enjoy its careless perfection before erasing it. Night returned, which is one sort of balance. The moon rose in a place where it had no business and made of roofs a geometry that had not been there. She lay flat and listened to the trellis creak under the weight of cold and felt her breath understand its job again. In that dark, she let one memory come and sit. She did not encourage it. She did not push it away. In the birchwood, the dead had made a ring, and the principal had made a kind of display of himself, because even the proud cannot help but teach their own undoing. She saw the moment before the moment the blade entered, saw the way a body carries its made idea of itself until an unmade idea corrects it, saw the quick fall of the unreal into humbled pieces. She did not call the memory victory. She called it a balancing. Then she set it beside her and told it to rest, and it did. She woke before dawn to frost on her mouth and the sound of a horse stamping a far-off shape in the night. She woke with a weight on her chest she knew was not grief and not dread, but the thing that claims those names in minds less practiced. Readiness. She rose and stoked the nearest stubborn fire and kept it modest. She ate bread she could not have baked and meat she could not have hunted. She moved into the day as if into a cloak that did not flatter her figure but kept her warm. All stories travel outward. The road north would carry the story of an ending that had no name, and the villages would receive the story and alter it and return it lighter or heavier depending upon how their own arithmetic fell that week. The road south would carry the same story, and it would be corrupted by towns along the way that had other things to sell and would want to sell those. East was sea, and beyond sea was the place where the house had its hall and its water and its pillars and its faces, and she would return there and put a small stone on the ledger. Not to say that she had done something remarkable, but to say that the balance had been moved and required now to be watched with a quiet eye. And then she would be sent, because there are always more places where balances are attempted and lost and found again. And she would go, because going is easier for one who has already unlearned it so much. And she would take the glove and the shard and her small habit of laughing at jokes about bakers when no one was watching, and she would walk into places where names are heavy and people will try to give her theirs, and she will accept them in her hands the way a fisherman accepts the net. Not for decoration, but to fill it with the right fish and throw the wrong ones back, and never let the weight of it drag her into water. For now the winter breathed like a great beast, learning that it had not been given its way but had not been killed either, and she breathed with it, and the ledger slept with one eye open, and the world remembered how to speak in small voices. She stood in that quiet and felt the pressure of the next task arrange itself somewhere below the horizon like blue ice gathering under a stream, and did not hurry, because hurrying wastes, and she had been sent not to waste but to measure. She sharpened her knife on a stone that had been used for so many knives the groove was a story in itself. She rubbed oil into the leather of her boots and smiled to herself in a way that no one would confuse for any kind of pride. And when a woman with hair like a spill of ink and eyes like numbers brought her a child to look at, because she had watched her quiet, because she had watched her put mending into the world like stitches into torn skin, because she had felt something tilt and then steady when she was near, She took the child in the equal grip that tells children the world is not the same shape it was an hour ago, and that this may be for better, and she did not pretend to be a good woman or a bad one. And she said to the child who would carry sentences long after anyone remembered who she was, "Eat when you are hungry. Sleep when you can. Learn the names of weeds. Know that winter comes and goes and something else comes with it. And be ready to set small stones under the world when it tilts." The child regarded her with an expression that might eventually become the expression of a woman who keeps a city fed. Then the child smiled, not because she was told to smile, but because the world in that moment lent itself to be enjoyed. And this was the smallest balance that mattered, and it was enough to begin the rest.